This week on The Record, Missouri House Minority Leader Crystal Quade runs for governor.
Missouri doesn't need more of the same, doesn't want more of the same. I'm running for governor so that people working extra shifts today can make life better for their kids tomorrow.
It is time to be bold and fearless and recognize this moment for what it is, a turning point.
St. Louis Democrat Karla is on the record to talk about her run for the U.S. Senate. Senator Josh Hawley is on the record to respond to blatant errors in a major Supreme Court case involving gay rights and his wife.
I am not my wife's minder. All right, let's just be clear on that. I'm not my wife's minder. My wife is not a minion who works for me.
Senator Dick Durbin is on the record pushing for ethics reform at the Supreme Court.
When it comes to the Supreme Court, unlike any other federal court in America, they don't have a code of ethics. They don't have a requirement for disclosure. And we're in the dark as to what their lives are really like.
And State Senator Steve Roberts is on the record with his plan to pass tougher gun laws. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Thank you for joining us. Missouri's top House Democrat Crystal Quade is running for governor in Missouri next year. Some Republicans might write off a Democratic campaign in a state that Donald Trump won by 18 points in 2016 and 16 points in 2020. But Democrats point to states next door, in Kansas and Kentucky, where Trump won by wider margins, and states there elected a Democratic candidate with the right message.
We rank last in too many categories like teacher pay, maternal mortality, state worker pay, and we have some of the highest crime rates in the nation. Unfortunately, my opponents in the Republican legislature have no interest in campaigning on those issues. They have one playbook: a relentless, full-scale attack on our rights and our freedoms. They seek to divide us at every turn. They manufacture crises where none exist. They assault workers' rights, and they want to be in the rooms with us and our doctors. And they even are trying to shut down our public libraries. And I frankly have had enough.
The field of Democrats angling for Senator Josh Hawley's job in 2024 is growing larger. Joining me now is State Senator Karla. It's good to have you with us on The Record.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
We were there at your launch when you announced this campaign. Give us an idea what this Democratic primary could look like over the next 13 months. Quite a slog. What kind of a Democrat are you?
I am a issuecrat.
Okay, so on the issues.
So on the issues,
Guns?
I deal with the issues. On guns, we need gun reform.
What does that look like? What does that look like from the federal level?
Well, from the federal level, that means that we don't need automatic weapons in urban areas.
Those are already illegal.
They are there. They're illegal, but they're still in our communities.
Semi-automatic weapons that have been modified to be...
Absolutely. I mean, if you see people walking down the street with AR-15s, have you seen them?
Those are semi-automatic?
Yes, semi-automatic. They're in our community. And Missouri, for one thing, is the only state that doesn't have an age requirement.
Would you support a federal assault weapons ban?
I would.
And do you think the voters of Missouri, where do you feel they will, what's their level of buy-in to an idea like that?
Everything requires education and change. And when people start to think about the children and the children that are dying with these assault weapons, we just had a school shooting here. When people can't send their kids to school, which used to be the safest place in the world, without being concerned if they're going to come home, we're at a crisis. And so I think that level of crisis will raise the awareness of individuals when they think about their grandchildren and their children that's out here. Because just because you think it's far away from you, then it becomes close to you when you're in a supermarket and somebody comes in with a weapon that has all of these ammunition that they can just shoot on and kill a bunch of people at one time. See, that's when things begin to register. We need to stop that.
On the issues, if a bill comes before your desk, you're a U.S. Senator, and it says we would write the Roe versus Wade viability standards into federal law, how would you vote?
I can't tell you how we'll vote on a bill. I'm smarter than that.
On an abortion measure?
Because every bill that comes to the floor has a whole lot of other stuff in it. But I am definitely for I'm not for the overturning of Roe versus Wade, if that's the question you're asking.
Would you enshrine those same protections into federal law as opposed to just a legal precedent?
I am for a woman's right to choose, because everybody has an individual right under the Constitution to make their own choice. And the attack on women's right has become unprecedented. And I am definitely for women's right to choose and their right to make that decision.
Should you be on the debate stage with Josh Hawley, what kind of contrast would that make?
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting contrast. And it's going to have an anticipation for people. And I'm hoping that they are anticipating that. That's why they should elect Karla May in the primary, so that we can have these clear conversations about what's right for Missourians and what's right for the United States. And we have to heal our nation and heal what's broken.
He leads with, speaks about, writes about his faith in government. So do you. What's the role of faith in the U.S. Senate or in a statesman or stateswoman?
Well, I think somebody told me this. What you say and your head and your thoughts and your feet should be going in the same direction.
Do you see that in him?
I will let the actions of January 6th speak for themselves. If you have faith in our government, we wouldn't try to overturn our democracy. We would support our democracy and not try to overturn the greatest nation in the world.
There you have it. Senator Karla May, thanks for stopping by.
Hey St. Louis, 5 on Your Side is hitting the road and heading your way. All summer long, we're bringing the Weather First forecast live to fairs and festivals near you. Watch at 4, 5, and 6 for 5 at the Fair from 5 on Your Side. Focused on you.
What's the forecast in Florida?
What's it like in Belleville?
No matter where you are.
What's the forecast in St. Peter's?
Or how you get your weather.
We know you want the forecast for your backyard. And you want it now.
Right here and right now.
The 5 on Your Side Weather First team. Focused on you.
Senator, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We haven't been able to hear from you since the Supreme Court made a number of rulings. We know your interest sitting on the Judiciary Committee. There's this one coming from Colorado where a graphic designer, your wife was closely involved in this case, helping to bring that lawsuit through Alliance Defending Freedom. But the graphic designer cannot be compelled to express themselves to make, for example, a website for a wedding for a gay couple. But there has been questions raised about the standing. I know the lower appellate court said that there was standing here, but we know now through reporters that the person who tried to ask this graphic designer to complete a website either didn't exist or didn't ask for it or claims it didn't ask for it. Does Alliance Defending Freedom have any credibility issues here?
So what, you're asking me now about my wife's case? Is that the deal, Mark?
Right, but a case you've commented on, a case of big, significant importance to the country.
Well, is this an attempt to rope my wife into that? Is that the latest? I mean, I tell you what, my wife is a working professional. She is an attorney who is every bit, if not more qualified than me. And you can ask her if you want to ask questions. Let's not try and use my wife here as a political ploy, Mark.
Not a political ploy at all, and I've seen that the Alliance Defending Freedom has given comments on this case. We're happy to cover those. I think the question was, how can an error like
Here's the
this
deal. Let me just set you straight on
arrive
this.
at the Supreme Court?
Let me just be clear about this, Mark, and help you get it through your head. My wife doesn't work for me. I'm not the spokesperson for my wife, and you know why? Because my wife has her own career. She's got her own job. She's a lawyer in her own right. So if you want comments from my wife, you can reach out to her, but don't come to me and ask me to comment on my wife and speak for my wife. Frankly, it's misogynistic. And I'm surprised I'm not surprised you're doing it, but it's disgraceful. I've seen the liberal media try it for days and weeks now on this. Newsweek had a headline, Josh Hawley's wife, this and that. It's disgraceful. I mean, it's really disgraceful, Mark. You ought to be ashamed.
Well, I think you're misframing what I asked. My question
no,
is,
I'm not. I'm responding to your direct question. You asked me to comment on my wife's work. You asked me about Alliance Defending Freedom, where my wife works. I am not my wife's minder. All right, let's just be clear on that. I'm not my wife's minder. My wife is not a minion who works for me. So if you want to ask her, someone who is an incredibly accomplished attorney and who has argued cases all over this country in federal courts. I'm incredibly proud of her. Don't try to denigrate her work by coming to me and saying, oh, well, you comment, you clean it up, you say this or that. That's ridiculous.
We're happy to follow up there.
Good. I look forward to it.
Again, the question was, how could an error like this arrive at the Supreme Court? Let's move on to another issue before the Supreme Court. We've now seen
Well,
reporting
let's not
that,
move on, though, from your misogyny, Mark. I just want it noted that if you're going to, I'm going to call you out on this every single time. Every time that you're misogynistic, every time that you try to imply that my wife somehow answers to me or that I should be the spokesperson for my wife or that there's some issue with my wife's litigation and that she ought to have to answer for me or I ought to have to answer for what she's doing, I'm going to call you out on it every single time. So just mark it down that I'm not going to allow this to pass. I think it is grossly inappropriate. I think it is grossly misogynistic. And if you think you can get away with it just because she's a conservative and is married to me, you are absolutely dead wrong.
That's not at all my intent, and that is a complete twisting of my words.
Good to talk with you, Mark. Talk to you soon.
Behind all of those hysterics was a deflection maneuver. You'll notice he never did answer the questions at hand. Second, viewers of this program know that we intentionally and routinely invite women and men of accomplished careers to this program to share their voices and their views about the way and the direction our government should head. By all accounts, Erin Hawley is one of those people, an accomplished attorney in her own right, and we did attempt to interview her in a separate interview with a set of very different questions relevant to this case. When we called the Alliance Defending Freedom where she works, at first an aide told us they were not taking incoming calls. Then we left a voicemail and offered an interview separately with an email. At one point they did offer and scheduled an interview with us with Mrs. Hawley, their senior counsel and former law clerk for Chief Justice John Roberts. Then just moments before that interview was to begin, it was abruptly canceled. We asked if we might reschedule it. They never replied. Senator Dick Durbin chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's up next.
Get the content that matters to you on your time. Breaking news as it happens. Weather alerts when you need them. On air, online, on our app, and on 5+. No matter how you watch, 5 on your side, focused on you. Most people think this is St. Louis, but we know better. The real St. Louis isn't a postcard. It's our neighborhoods, our communities, our people. And that's our focus. 5 on your side is here to tell the stories that affect your neighborhood, that impact your family, that matter to you. Because no story is bigger than the one that affects you. 5 on your side, focused on you.
Senator, good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. I wonder how concerned you are about the behavior of Justice Sotomayor's staff in pushing her book sales to boost her profits, and where would you rank that in comparison with behavior we've seen reported about Justices Alito and Thomas?
You know, I'll put them in the same category. These are things which should have been disclosed, and if they had been disclosed, would have raised questions as to the amount of money that was being spent, the amount of money that was being raised. But it's really, we've had to rely on journalists and reporters who are doing the investigating. Because when it comes to the Supreme Court, unlike any other federal court in America, they don't have a code of ethics, they don't have a requirement for disclosure, and we're in the darkest of what their lives are really like.
And it's kind of a strange scenario. Many federal judges who see this are shocked and will say so privately, but as judges feel hesitant to wade into public political discourse. We can certainly say that some of them have said as much. I wonder about comments from your colleague, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, though, who describes this court as a, quote, captured court, captured by big money interest groups. That's a pretty bleak picture that he paints. Do you see actual evidence of the corrupting influence having a corrupting effect on the outcomes of cases?
I certainly do. I have to agree with Senator Whitehouse on his conclusions. And they're based on close observation as to how the court is making decisions. Unfortunately, there's a process that begins with a private organization, privately funded organization, one of these dark money operations called the Federalist Society, which, if you'll remember, the previous President Trump announced he was drawing his nominees for the court from a list that they had provided to him. That has never been done in American history. I mean, he was very blatant about it. This special interest group is going to draw up a list of eligible judges based on political philosophy and how they're going to rule on issues. It's no wonder that the integrity of the court is being questioned. And now when we see these personal things coming their way, trips and vacations and real estate being purchased and all sorts of things, and most of it, we stumble on the information as to its occurrence. That's just not the way to run the highest court in the land.
And your bill would change that. I understand you have a bill that you might want to speak about, which would add an ethics reform package to require that of the court. But I want to ask you this question, because Congresswoman Cori Bush and Senator Ed Markey, they want to expand the court. They filed legislation to do that. If the Republican House doesn't pass your ethics package, is it time to do that, to expand and pack the court?
Well, let's establish the basics. First, the number of Supreme Court justices is not in the Constitution. It's decided by Congress. And in 1869, long time ago, they established it would be 9 Supreme Court justices. It could have been a different number. It could be a different number in the future. But Congress has to make that decision if they want to move forward. Keep in mind that in the Senate, even though they say, well, the Democrats control the Senate, we have 51 senators. It takes literally 60 votes to pass a measure like that. So you'll need bipartisan agreement to move forward. I think it's a long shot. It's worth discussing. But as far as I'm concerned, I want to focus on making this court honest and restore its reputation as my highest priority.
I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. It sounds like you're open to that idea. Could you support it?
I'm not sure. I want to wait and see. But as I said, my focus is on making the current court, the 9 justices, accountable to the American people like every other federal judge. That's not too much to ask.
And I'm told we're low on time, so I want to be, this is my last question here. How concerned are you about the accuracy of information brought in cases to the Supreme Court? We see that Colorado case about gay rights and the wedding website there. Who is ultimately responsible for inaccurate, incomplete, or misleading information appearing in court briefs like that?
Well, there's a process, and the process is a trial court making a decision, reviewed by a circuit court, and in a rare number of cases, reviewed by the Supreme Court. In this case, there was a decision in terms of a person's religious beliefs and freedom of speech and the like. It was an unusual case. They really didn't have a contract between the plaintiff and defendant. They moved forward with a theoretical case. That's hardly ever done by the court. It looked to me like they were looking for a venue to make a decision, even though they had trouble finding one.
Should there be consequences for that? There was a plaintiff, but there was some imaginary relationship between them and a prospective
Exactly. This was supposed to be about gay marriage, and a woman who said, I as owner of this company shouldn't be required to help them put together a website for a gay marriage because I don't believe in it. I don't, in my conscience, I can't go along with it. Turns out the defendant was straight, was not gay, and didn't do any business with the plaintiff in the case. In most circumstances, a court wouldn't even consider a case that far-fetched, but they did in this case.
So should there be consequences there?
Well, the consequences are up to the American people at this point. The Supreme Court is an independent branch of our government.
Senator, thanks for your time.
You're right.
I'm Weather First meteorologist Tracy Hinson, and you're probably used to seeing me here every weekend with your latest forecast. But ever wonder what I do when the cameras are off? I might just be headed to a school or youth group in your area. I show kids at all grade levels the power of science. Look, we made a cloud. We talk safety and demystify the most terrifying of weather phenomena. Getting students excited about science, technology, engineering, and math is incredibly rewarding. But the best part of all is knowing that the next 5 on your side meteorologists might just be in one of our classrooms, and I can't wait to meet them.
First, we're going to switch gears and go to State Senator Steve Roberts here from Missouri. Good to have you with us.
Hey, glad to be here.
We want to ask you about this push, the failed push so far to pass tougher gun laws in Missouri. Before we do this, I think this is our first time interviewing with you since your run for Congress. Do you hope to continue a life in elected office after this term?
Absolutely. I'm really excited I can do one more term in the state Senate. It's been one of the greatest honors of my life.
Viewers who watched this program last week saw some of Mayor Jones's texts, and you responded to that story. But I want to ask you a different question. They were derogatory text messages about you as the governor was considering candidates for the circuit attorney's job. Is that a job you'd want to do?
I mean, for me, I focuses on my work in the Senate, and so I plan on continuing that.
Is that a job you'd want to do at some point?
I mean, again, my focus right now is the Missouri State Senate.
I hear you. I have to ask this question as well. You did face a lot of accusations during your run for Congress about conduct that was prior to that campaign. A lot of those details have been reported. For any viewers new to this issue, you never faced criminal charges. There were 2 settlements with 2 women. One included a payment, one did not. I won't ask you to relitigate each of those issues here. People can read those stories if they wish. But to viewers or potential voters, I do want to ask you this question, because I don't think I've seen this reported. Is there anything about the way you conducted yourself with those women that you regret?
Mark, this is something that we've talked about before. I've always told the truth and will continue to do so. And I think voters and my constituents have seen that.
That sounds like a no.
What's that?
Is there anything about the way you conducted yourself around those women that you now regret?
Again, as I said, I've been completely honest and will continue to tell the truth.
All right, we'll leave it there. There are at least 3 separate pushes to crack down on gun violence in St. Louis right now. One at City Hall, which would exploit what some have called a loophole in state law to seize or safe harbor guns from minors while that is adjudicated separately. If they don't have a concealed carry permit, that means they're 19 or under. Separately, on the 2024 ballot, there's a push right now to put a question that would allow local cities to enact their own gun laws, whatever they choose, if they so choose to do that. And then in Jefferson City, your push to change state law. Which of these 3 chances has the best chance to survive?
I think the initiative petition is a great mechanism if we can get that done. There's been a lot of push on both sides of the aisle. I was really proud to work with some of my colleagues on the Republican side to get something done on guns because folks are starting to see that we need a change in the state of Missouri.
Is it harder or easier in a presidential election year in 2024 when you go back to session to get gun laws through Jefferson City?
It'll be the governor's last term. I mean, I think that it's a great time now to do something on guns.
When he's a lame duck.
Your term.
That's the term. That's a widely used term. No insult intended. But he doesn't have any future political ambition. He might feel a little easier signing something. Is that what you're saying?
I would think so, and it's something that folks on both sides of the aisle agree needs to be done.
Your bill would have made it a misdemeanor or on the first offense or a felony on the second for anyone caught carrying a gun in St. Louis without a concealed carry permit. The way the bill reads, would it really only apply to St. Louis?
Which, I'm sorry, I filed several versions of the bill. Say that again?
One of the versions of your bill that you had, it looked to my reading like it would only apply to the city of St. Louis, a city not within a county.
So the final version that we ended up with, it would apply across the state, and what it did was it mirrored federal law. So right now we're one of only 2 states that makes it that does not have a crime for minors to carry firearms.
If you were, is that a negotiating position you would be satisfied with falling back to, leaving it applying only to St. Louis? Could that get more buy-in from outstate Republicans who would have qualms about voting for something that might affect their voters?
I'd be open to that. One of my bigger concerns is there a constitutional issue with us creating a special law that's focused on the city of St. Louis that ends up getting thrown out. So, if that's something we can make stick, absolutely. I mean, I represent the citizens of the city of St. Louis, and that's what is the number one thing that comes up, whether it be a town hall meeting, a business meeting, a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce. It's what do we do about gun violence in the city.
News judgments are sometimes hard to make in newsrooms when you're allocating resources to what to cover in different days. And during the final days of the Senate debate, we didn't quite know what was going to pop up when. I recall being in St. Louis County covering a very different story when we were following along on audio about the debate over control of the St. Louis Police Department. You and Senator Karla were trying to attach some amendments there that would make it illegal for children to carry guns in the streets of St. Louis. I don't know that you ever intended those to actually pass or just to make a point.
Well, some of our gun legislation, actually, we had bipartisan support, and Representative Lane Roberts, no relation. He was the former police chief of Joplin, Missouri Police Chief of the Year, former Director of Public Safety for our state. He'd actually proposed something similar in the House chamber.
So what kind of feedback are you hearing from Missouri Republicans? It sounds like you're saying there's bipartisan support. Are you getting mixed messages from them in private and in public?
No, I mean, it depends on which representative or which senator we're talking about in particular. You know, I think some folks, I'd say the majority, understand that we need something to be done, but there are some folks who are on the fringes who have the position that we don't have a problem, guns aren't the problem.
We started our conversation talking about the mayor's text messages. One of those text messages stood out to some of our viewers because she pointed to gun laws in Chicago and said they don't stop violence there. She was making a broader point about community investment having a longer term impact in eradicating or solving some of the underlying issues, but some Republicans have seized on those remarks to bolster their rhetoric. Did those comments from the mayor hurt your chances to pass gun laws in Jefferson City?
Well, I think they hurt just citizens as a whole across the state of Missouri, because you're saying that, you know, the things that me and Senator May have been working on aren't going to affect gun violence in the city of St. Louis. You talk with law enforcement, you know, the legislation that we passed out of committee in the state Senate, no opposition testimony. So we actually started working on early with the NRA. I would think most folks would agree it's one of the most conservative organizations in America. And even they looked at it and said, you know what, we would not oppose this piece of legislation.
They wouldn't support it, but they weren't going to actively oppose it.
Exactly.
How come it didn't get across the finish line?
Part of it is I think we just ran out of time. You know, at the end, it was the last few weeks of session, and there was a lot of push as far as the criminal justice, just crime bills in general that were coming through the Senate.
Senators, correct me if I'm wrong, senators have a degree of clout. The way the system is set up, you could really force the issue if you wanted to, could you not?
Well, I mean, I'm not the pro tem. I can't. I'm not in the majority party. So
how far could you go?
Agenda.
Is there any fear that if you really push the issue through filibuster or something else to try and do what some in the conservative caucus have done and jam things up until you get your way, is there any fear that you're spending political capital that you really can't spend?
Well, no. I mean, I think this is something we're not going to back down on. It's worth spending that political capital.
If no one backed down and it didn't get done, then what happened?
This past session?
You said we ran out of time. I mean, the clock does run out, but could you have asserted more insistence in that moment?
I think we pushed as far as we could this past session, and that's why we tend to bring it up next session.
So it sounds like you're giving voters a ray of hope that in 2024, a presidential election year, you think this could get done.
Absolutely.
There are some cynics who might look at that and say these people are trying to get reelected in the same year. They might not want to touch a bill that looks to their base, like or if they're facing a primary challenge, like they're voting for gun regulations.
Well, you know, I think that these folks want to say that they want to back the blue and support our law enforcement, so it absolutely makes sense for them to get behind something like this.
Do you see specific instances where, had gun laws been present, police officers would not have been injured or in harm's way?
Absolutely. I mean, just this past year, unfortunately in Senator May's district, there was a school shooting. You had a mother who called the police, was trying to do everything that they could to get this person to make sure that they did not have a weapon. I mean, that's one of the most unfortunate things about this, are these preventable tragedies.
Mm-hmm. When you look at gun laws, and Republicans, we had Jay Ashcroft on this program recently, and he said we don't need new laws, we need to get better at enforcing them. Couldn't that be a both and? Do you see room to improve the enforcement of current laws already on the books?
Well, the bigger issue, though, is right now it's not a crime for kids to have guns. You have a large amount of folks, kids aged 13 to 17, who are out in the streets committing these crimes.
It is a crime to pull the trigger, though.
Yeah, but I mean, that's like, you know, putting a stop sign up at an intersection after 3 kids have been run over. I mean, you want to stop these preventable tragedies from happening, and that's our role as the state legislature to do that.
Okay, how far down that road of gun regulations are you willing to go? Ban assault rifles?
I don't see a path for that.
Not in Missouri?
Not in Missouri. I'd focus more on what we can get done. I think we can get something done as far as mirroring the federal standards and keeping these firearms out of the hands of kids.
You were present at Senator Karla May's announcement for the U.S. Senate. Should voters read into that an endorsement of her campaign?
I mean, Karla's been a great mentor to me. She's one of the most effective senators, not a Democrat or Republican. You know, she's going to be successful no matter what she does.
Is that an endorsement?
Again, I think Karla May is fantastic. I haven't taken a position in that primary at this time.
What does she bring to the field of primary candidates?
Oh, I mean, she's definitely the most experienced legislator out there. I mean, she's served, what, if not over a decade in the state legislature?
13 years so far.
Yeah, very impressive.
And when you look at her, some people note her religious fervor. Is that a big part of who she is?
Yeah, she speaks from the heart, and I think that's one of her most admirable qualities.
First impressions of Lucas Kuntz?
I've met him a couple of times. Seems like a nice guy. Don't know him particularly well.
And Wesley Bell?
Great attorney as well.
So it's all positive things to say.
All positive things to say.
A word association game. If I say to you 6 more years of Josh Hawley, you think what?
I think concern for our region.
In what regard?
Well, I mean, you've got someone who's pandering to the most extreme aspects of his party, and that doesn't help us.
Very interesting. All right, State Senator Steve Roberts, thanks for joining us on The Record.
You got it.
We'll be here at the same time next week. Until then, we're off the record.